It was a Saturday afternoon when I sat in my small, newly rented apartment in the east side of Atlanta. I was stretched out on my couch, sipping a cup of hot tea with my other hand resting on my forehead. I could feel the dizziness creeping in from the overwhelming flood of messages on my phone. Calls from Mom, Dad, and Brandon, my brother, had been buzzing non-stop. Each name flashed on the screen over and over like a broken record, as though one more second of silence from me would cause the phone to explode from sheer overload. 6 months had passed since I walked out of that house. 6 months without a single argument, no tears, no dramatic slam of a door. I quietly packed a few clothes, my old laptop, and a notebook full of finance notes into a faded duffel bag, then stepped outside as the sun dipped below the skyline. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one imagined I wouldn't come back, they had been used to me. Diana. The easygoing daughter. The one who always took care of things, always paid the bills when it was tight. I had been the invisible fixer behind every financial mess, the one who stepped in when Brandon lost another job or when Mom and Dad forgot to pay the electric bill. But in that moment, as I sat on that couch in my new apartment, something became painfully clear. I wasn't just leaving my house. I was leaving my role. For nearly a decade, I had been running a system I never built, a system where I was the only one doing the work while everyone else just coasted along. But now, here I was. Alone. For the first time, I could breathe. For the first time, I didn't have to fix anyone's problems. I looked at my phone again. Mom's name flashed. The same pattern. Call after call. The guilt was a whisper in my head, but it wasn't as strong anymore. I had walked away for a reason. I had walked away because I was finally ready to stop carrying the weight of everyone else's mess. The silence felt strange, but it also felt like a long-lost friend I hadn't seen in years. It was a quiet freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to savor that quiet. To breathe without wondering if someone else needed something from me. Would they ever understand? Would they ever realize that I wasn't just being dramatic or selfish, but instead choosing to reclaim my life? I didn't know. But at that moment, it didn't matter. For the first time in years, I was free. Let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Diana Miller. I'm 28 years old and work as a financial analyst. I had always been the dependable one, the one who stepped up when needed. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, stayed out of trouble, and kept my head down, eventually, I'd be recognized. But as the years went on, it became clearer that no matter how much I did, no one really seemed to notice. No one truly appreciated what I was giving, and then there was Brandon. My younger brother, 32 years old, and the complete opposite of me in many ways. Brandon dropped out of art school after just 2 years and bounced around from job to job. He worked as a barista, a delivery driver, and then, nothing. Unemployed again. But despite his lack of stability, he was the dreamer. The one Mom and Dad always defended. The one they made excuses for when he couldn't hold down a job. Meanwhile, there was me, the one who always played by the rules. I worked from a young age, not to buy fancy clothes or go out with friends, but because I knew no one else would take care of me if I didn't. While my friends were getting picked up by their parents after school, I was riding my bike to a local bakery, wiping down tables, mopping floors, and then heading back home after dark. I wasn't asking for much. I didn't need to be treated like a princess. But all I wanted was to feel seen. To feel like my effort mattered. Instead, it was always Brandon who needed support, and somehow I was always there to catch him when he fell. Mom would buy him the new laptop he needed for his dreams. Dad would defend him when he lost another job. But when I succeeded, when I got a full ride to Georgia State University, when I landed a job at one of the top investment consulting firms, I never heard the words "I'm proud of you." I thought that if I kept pushing, kept working harder, they would see me. But the more I did, the more I became invisible. I was the one who handled the bills, fixed the roof, and took care of the house when Dad couldn't. I was the one who was expected to do everything, yet somehow, I was never enough. No thank yous. No recognition. Just endless requests. One day, I told Mom I was saving up to buy my own place. She responded casually, "A girl buying a house on her own? Aren't you worried people will think no one wants to marry you?" That was the moment I realized I would never get their approval. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because in their eyes, Brandon would always come first. And I was just the backup plan, the one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. 6 months ago, I left. No fanfare. No shouting. I packed a duffel bag and walked out without saying a word. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done. And as I sat in my new apartment, all alone for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. But peace, like silence, can be unsettling. As the days passed, I started to wonder, did I make the right choice? Was walking away the right thing to do, or was I just being selfish? Would they ever understand? The phone kept buzzing. The messages from Mom, Dad, and Brandon kept pouring in. They needed me again. But this time, I wasn't there. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. The first few weeks after I left were peaceful. I spent my time settling into my new apartment, finding a rhythm in my life that was all my own. No more late-night texts asking for money, no more unexpected bills landing on my doorstep. I could breathe again. I had time to think. I finally realized how much of myself I had given away over the years, my energy, my savings, my time, and how little I had left for myself. But just as I was starting to feel the freedom, the phone buzzed again. It was Mom. I stared at the screen for a moment before deciding to answer. Diana, her voice came through, sounding strained, like she was trying to hold it together. "Dad hasn't been feeling well. His back's acting up again, and we don't know what to do. The house, we might lose it. Can you help us?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the words heavy in my chest. There it was. The request for help. Again. I should have expected it, but a part of me was still surprised. After everything, after walking away, they were asking for my help. And I knew, without even thinking about it, that if I said yes, I would fall right back into the same role, the fixer. The one who made sure everything was okay. The one who could never say no. The truth was, I had always felt like I was the one keeping everything together, the one holding up the fragile balance of our family. But in reality, it was more like I was being used. I had spent years, my whole adulthood, trying to please them, trying to make them proud, but I had never been enough. It wasn't that I was unappreciated, it was that I had never been given the space to be more than just the caretaker. No one ever saw me for who I was outside of the role I played in their lives. When the phone rang again, I almost didn't pick it up. I was exhausted by the thought of it all. But as the ring continued, I knew I had to answer. The message was always the same. "Can you help us with the mortgage? Can you take care of the bills again?" I couldn't do it anymore. That night, I sat with my phone in hand, trying to decide what to do. The messages kept coming, one after the other. "We're struggling, Diana. Please help." And then, from Brandon, the familiar voice I knew so well, "You know, it wouldn't hurt to pitch in a little. We need this." His words stung. He'd never once thought of helping me when I needed it. But he expected me to always be there for him. He knew that I would give, no questions asked. I took a long look at the phone, and for the first time, I didn't respond. I simply put it down. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to justify my decision to help. I was done. I had given everything, and for what? A thank you? A pat on the back? No. That wasn't enough anymore. The silence after that was almost deafening. For days, I didn't hear from anyone. It was like I had disappeared from their world. I had become a ghost. And at first, it felt lonely, even isolating. But as the days passed, I realized something: I didn't need to be their lifeline anymore. It wasn't my job to fix their problems, to shoulder their burdens, and to make up for their failures, and yet, even as I thought this, the guilt started creeping in. Was I wrong to leave? Should I have just helped them one last time, just like I had always done? I needed answers. I needed to know if I had made the right decision. But as I sat there in my small apartment, I realized that the only person who could answer that question was me. I didn't need anyone else's approval. I had lived my whole life trying to fix things for them. But now, I was the one who needed fixing. The silence stretched on. A few days passed, then a week. No messages, no calls. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied to my family's chaos. I woke up without the looming anxiety of what problem I'd have to fix that day. I didn't have to worry about bills, car insurance, or a leaky roof. I didn't have to explain why I couldn't keep giving, but then, the message came. It was from Brandon. His text was simple, yet it hit me like a wave. "Dad's not doing well. Please, can you help us? We don't know what to do. The house is going to be foreclosed." That familiar knot tightened in my stomach. The feeling of responsibility, of duty, crept back in. But now, I had to stop myself. I knew I couldn't go back to the old cycle. I couldn't go back to being their safety net. I sat in my small apartment, looking at the message. The room felt quiet, but my mind was in chaos. They were asking for help again, as if nothing had changed. They didn't care about the months of silence, the years I had spent bending over backward to take care of them. And now, once again, they wanted me to fix it all, but I couldn't. Not this time. The pain of knowing that they hadn't changed, that they still saw me as their fixer, hit me harder than I expected. They had always assumed I would be there when things got tough. But what about when I needed help? When I had to sacrifice my own dreams to help them? No one had ever asked me what I needed. As the days went by, I found myself facing the truth. My parents had never truly seen me. They had never cared about my dreams or my aspirations. They saw me as the reliable daughter who would always be there, always fix things when they broke, and then the final straw came. One evening, I received a call from my mom. Her voice, as usual, was full of panic and desperation. "Diana, we're in trouble. The mortgage is overdue. You've always helped us before. Please, don't turn your back on us." Her words cut deep. How could I be the one to always fix things? How could I be the one who was expected to solve every problem when they never saw me as an individual, just as someone who could keep them from falling apart? I felt a mix of anger and sadness well up inside me. But most of all, I felt betrayal. It wasn't the financial strain that had hurt me, it was the emotional toll. All these years, I had given so much, and in return, I was treated as if I were nothing more than a bank. A source of money. That night, I didn't respond. I didn't pick up the phone. Instead, I sat in silence, allowing myself to feel everything I had pushed aside for so long. And then, just when I thought I had moved past it, the twist came. My dad called. I didn't pick up. His voice left a voicemail. "Diana, please help. We can't do this without you." But then came something I never expected, a message from Brandon, with a tone that was different from the others. He was angry, accusatory. "What do you think you're doing, Diana? Do you think you can just walk away from this family? You've always been the one to save us, and now you're just leaving us to drown." His words were sharp, but they weren't the ones that cut the deepest. It was the realization that he still didn't see me. That all this time, I had been the one holding everything together, and yet when I stopped, I was seen as the problem. I was labeled selfish, cold, and heartless. But the truth was, I had been the one who had been neglected, the one who had been drained. I was the one who had been giving and giving without ever being seen for who I was, and that was the moment I knew for sure that I was done. I wasn't going back. The next few days were filled with silence. I didn't answer any calls. I didn't respond to any messages. The flood of demands from my family had stopped, and with it, a weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the pressure, free from the guilt, free from the constant feeling that I was always being asked to give more. I had finally chosen myself. I spent my days walking around the city, taking in the sights and sounds that had always been drowned out by my family's needs. I started focusing on things that mattered to me, like reading, painting, and slowly rebuilding my life from the ground up. My apartment, small and modest, felt like a sanctuary now. It was mine, and that meant something. It wasn't just a space I had to pay for, it was a place where I could finally breathe, but the messages kept coming. They didn't stop. It was as though they thought I was going to come back, that I was going to fix everything again. They thought I would break under the pressure, like I had before. But this time was different. One morning, I received a text from Brandon, the one person who had always taken and never given. The message was simple, but it hit me hard: "We need your help. The house is going to be foreclosed if you don't step in." I stared at the screen, the weight of those words hitting me like a wave. The house, the place I had sacrificed everything for. The place I had worked countless hours to keep afloat. It was going to be taken from them, and they still thought I was the answer. They still thought I was the one who had to save them, but I wasn't their savior. I wasn't anyone's savior. I had been holding on to something that wasn't mine to carry, and I couldn't do it anymore. The lesson was clear: I couldn't keep fixing the things that were broken when no one else was willing to do the work. I had spent years thinking that love meant sacrifice, but now I knew that love meant boundaries. I blocked their numbers. I stopped checking my phone for messages from them. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my money, not my time, and certainly not my heart. Days turned into weeks, and the silence continued. But this time, it wasn't the kind of silence that suffocated me. It was peaceful. It was the kind of silence that came from finally taking control of my own life and letting go of the past. It was the sound of me choosing my own happiness. Then, one day, I received a letter. It wasn't from my family, but from a company I had worked with a few years back. They wanted me to come back and work with them on a new project. I smiled to myself. I wasn't surprised. Life had a way of coming full circle. It was like the universe was giving me a sign that I was on the right path. I had spent so long looking after everyone else, sacrificing my own dreams, that I had forgotten what it meant to dream for myself. Now, I was taking that first step toward the life I wanted, not the one I had been forced to live. The lesson I had learned over the past year was simple, but powerful: you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't keep giving to others when you don't have anything left for yourself. Love isn't about losing yourself for others, it's about knowing when to stand up and say no, and when to choose your own peace. I wasn't the daughter who could be taken for granted anymore. I wasn't the sister who would always pick up the pieces. I was Diana, and I was finally living for me, and with that realization, I let go of the guilt. I let go of the shame. I let go of the weight I had carried for so long. I had chosen to put myself first, and that was the most important choice I could have made. As the weeks passed, I found myself growing into this new version of me, one who wasn't tied down by old expectations, one who was finally taking responsibility for her own happiness. I started taking long walks in the park, something I had always loved but never had time for before. I began to read more, explore new hobbies, and slowly rebuild my life in a way that felt right for me. It was a kind of rebirth, like waking up after a long, exhausting sleep, ready to start living the life I had been too scared to live before. But even as I moved forward, there were moments of doubt. There were times when I thought about my family, about my mom, dad, and Brandon, and the years of my life that I had given to them. What if I had made the wrong decision? What if, despite everything, I should have tried harder to make things work? What if I was just being selfish? I remember the day I went back to my old family home to drop off some old clothes. The house looked just as it always had, worn, tired, and in desperate need of repairs. But when I stepped inside, everything felt different. The air was thick with unspoken words. with everything that had been left unsaid. It wasn't the home I remembered. It wasn't a place of warmth or love anymore. It was just a house, cold and empty. Mom and Dad were sitting in the living room, just as they always had. But there was a heaviness between us that hadn't been there before. They didn't ask about my new life. They didn't ask how I was doing. Instead, they just stared at me with the same expectant eyes they had always had. And in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for so long: they didn't see me. Not really. They saw the person who fixed everything, the person who always cleaned up their messes. But they didn't see Diana. They didn't see the woman who had dreams of her own, the woman who had been crushed by the weight of their demands for far too long. It was in that moment that I truly understood. This wasn't about them, it was about me. I had spent so long trying to fit into a role that wasn't mine, trying to be the daughter, the sister, the person they needed me to be, that I had lost sight of who I really was, and with that realization, I finally let go. I walked out of that house with my head held high, knowing that I had made the right decision. I had chosen myself, and that was something I would never apologize for. I'm not going to pretend that it was easy. There were times when I missed them. There were times when I felt guilty, when their voices rang in my head, telling me that I was selfish, that I was wrong. But I had to remind myself that I was not their savior. I was not their ATM. I was a person with my own dreams, my own life to live. And that life didn't have to be defined by what they expected of me. Over the next few months, I continued to build my new life. I found a job that I loved, and I started to make real progress on my savings. I began to travel more, explore new places, and meet new people. My life became my own again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It wasn't easy. There were times when I doubted myself. There were times when I missed my family, and times when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But then I would remember the exhaustion, the constant pressure, the years of giving without ever receiving. I would remember how they never saw me, how they only saw what I could give, and in those moments, I realized that my decision to walk away was the best decision I could have made. Because it wasn't just about me escaping from a toxic situation, it was about me choosing to live for myself. It was about me setting boundaries, saying no, and reclaiming my life. As time went on, I started to see the fruits of my decision to let go of the past. I was no longer a person defined by the needs and expectations of others. I could finally breathe again without feeling like I was suffocating under a mountain of debt, guilt, and the weight of familial responsibility. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was all I needed. I began to embrace the little things, things that I had never made time for before. I started cooking for myself, experimenting with recipes that had always seemed out of reach. I started going to the gym, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I finally started to take care of myself in a way I had never done before. And in that, I found peace. One of the most surprising things I discovered was that I actually liked being alone. I had spent so much of my life worrying about my family's happiness, trying to fix everything for everyone, that I had forgotten what it felt like to just exist for myself. I had forgotten that I was allowed to be happy, to live without constantly carrying the burdens of others, but there was also a part of me that longed for connection. I had been so focused on surviving for so long that I hadn't taken the time to build real relationships outside of my family. I was used to being the one who gave, the one who took care of everything, but now I had to learn how to accept help and build connections that were not based on obligation. I started meeting new people, friends who saw me for who I was, not just for what I could offer them. I realized that real love, real friendship, wasn't about saving someone or constantly sacrificing for them. It was about mutual respect, mutual support, and understanding. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, not just what I could do for them. But despite all the positive changes in my life, there were still moments when I was pulled back into the past. Sometimes, late at night, I would receive a text from mom or dad, asking for help. They had stopped calling, but the messages still came. Each one felt like a test, a reminder that they still expected me to drop everything for them. I would look at those messages and feel a familiar knot in my stomach, a wave of guilt that I had fought so hard to let go of. But now, instead of responding with a sense of obligation, I would take a deep breath and let it pass. I had learned that I didn't owe them my life. I didn't owe them my peace. One day, after weeks of silence, I received a message from Brandon. It was a simple text, just asking if I was okay. For a moment, I hesitated. I wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back. But something inside me told me to respond. So, I did. We talked for a little while, about the past, about the present, and about the choices we had made. And in that conversation, I realized something that I had never fully understood before. My family's expectations, their demands, were not my fault. They had made their choices just as I had made mine. And now, I had to live with the consequences of those choices. Just like them, it wasn't about right or wrong. It wasn't about blame. It was about understanding that we all have to take responsibility for our actions, for our decisions. And sometimes, that means letting go of the things that hold us back, even when it feels like the hardest thing in the world to do. I continued to move forward with my new life, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of balance. My apartment, though small and unremarkable, became my sanctuary. It was mine, and that made it all the more precious. There was no longer the constant rush of obligations and expectations pulling at me. There was only space for me to breathe, to think, and to grow, but as much as I had gained from letting go of my past, I couldn't help but wonder, had I really done the right thing? Sometimes, when the silence settled in at night, I would question myself. Had I been too harsh? Had I given up on my family too easily? I had walked away because I couldn't carry their burdens anymore, but now that I was free, I wasn't sure what I had left in the place of all the sacrifice. Then, one afternoon, my mind was unexpectedly brought back to the reality of my past. I was sipping coffee, enjoying the calm of my own company, when the phone rang. The caller ID flashed, "Mom." For a moment, I felt my chest tighten, the familiar knot of worry pulling at me. But this time, I didn't pick up immediately. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to face the guilt that always followed one of her calls. The voicemail came in a few minutes later. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the play button. I wanted to listen, I wanted to hear what she had to say. But a part of me also didn't want to let the past back in. With a sigh, I pressed play. The message was brief. "Diana, your father's health is deteriorating, and we really need your help. We can't keep doing this without you. Please, we're not asking for much. Just a little help, like before." I closed my eyes as I listened. The words were almost the same as they always had been. It was a plea, a call for me to step back into the role I had played for so long. The role of the rescuer. The one who fixed everything. The one who carried the weight. I felt a surge of emotion, but this time it was different. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't sad. I was tired. I was tired of being the one who had to save them. I was tired of feeling like I was the only one holding everything together. But even with all that, I knew deep down that I couldn't just shut myself off completely. It wasn't about guilt. It wasn't about blame. It was about understanding. Understanding that I had done my part. I had given all that I could, and now, it was time for them to face their own reality. I wasn't abandoning them. I was giving them the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. It was time for them to understand that they couldn't rely on me forever. I thought about it for a while, weighing the options. My family had always depended on me, but I realized that the only way they could truly grow was if they learned to do it for themselves. And if that meant cutting the financial ties, cutting the emotional ties, then that was what I had to do. I picked up my phone and began typing a message to my mother. The words flowed out of me. Calm but firm. "Mom, I've already given everything I can. You and Dad need to figure things out on your own. I won't be able to help anymore. I'm sorry, but this is the end." When I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. For the first time in my life, I had done something for me. The next few days passed in silence, as if the universe itself was giving me space to breathe. The phone sat on the table untouched. I didn't need to check it. I knew what would happen next. My family would try to reach out to fix things, but I was done. The cycle had broken, and I wasn't going to return to it, but even in my newfound peace, there was still that gnawing question: had I done the right thing? What if they really needed me? What if they were just struggling and needed a little help to get back on their feet? It was hard to ignore the possibility. One morning, as I sat at my small kitchen table sipping coffee, I thought about all the years I had spent carrying them. All the things I had given up to make sure they were okay. I had lost so much of myself in the process. But this new life, this new quiet, felt like I was finally getting back to who I was supposed to be. Yet, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mom. It was Brandon. I took a deep breath before answering. "Diana, listen. You're making a huge mistake." His voice came through, heavy with accusation. "You can't just leave us to struggle. You've always been the one who's taken care of us. What kind of person just walks away like this?" I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but I kept it in check. I had heard these words before. This was the same old game, the same manipulation. Only this time, I wasn't playing. "Brandon," I said, my voice steady. "I've carried this family for years, and I'm done. I'm not the one who should be fixing your mistakes. You need to face what's happening, and I'm not going to keep sacrificing everything for you to sit on the sidelines. You're a grown man. It's time you started acting like one." There was silence on the other end, and I knew he was processing what I had said. But it didn't matter. I had made my decision. I wasn't backing down. The conversation ended, and for the first time in years, I felt no guilt. There was no weight on my shoulders, no burden of responsibility. I had finally let go. The silence in my apartment was profound. It had become my sanctuary, a place where I could just be. No phone calls. No demands. No guilt. But I knew the quiet couldn't last forever. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to reach out again, especially my mom. One evening, after a long day at work, I was sitting on the couch, staring out the window. The city was bustling below, but I felt removed from it all. My phone, silent for days, suddenly buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Diana, we need to talk. Please, just call us back. We're sorry for everything. Please don't leave us hanging." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart conflicted. I had spent so many years being the one who always fixed things. The one who always came to the rescue when they needed it. But now, with the space I had created for myself, I realized something. They didn't need me to save them. What they needed was to face the consequences of their actions, something I had never allowed them to do. I set the phone down without replying, but the pull to reconnect was strong. For years, I had been their lifeline, and now that lifeline had been cut. It felt, almost unnatural, like I was turning my back on something I had been conditioned to do for so long. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still processing the text from my mom. I had gotten used to the silence, to the space I had created. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I could have handled it differently, but the truth was, I was tired. Tired of always being the one who sacrificed, tired of always being the one who cleaned up everyone else's mess. I had spent so much of my life thinking that love meant always putting others first, even at the cost of my own happiness. But I was learning that love for others shouldn't come at the expense of my own peace. A few days later, another message came from Mom, this time with more urgency. "Please, Diana. We can't do this without you. We're sorry. Brandon can't handle things, and your dad's health is getting worse. Please come back. We need you." The words stung. I had been here before, many times, and each time, it was the same story. They needed me, but only because they had taken advantage of me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not this time. Days passed in silence. I went about my life, building it one small moment at a time. I had a routine now. The city felt different without the constant pull of family expectations hanging over me. I focused on my work, on my hobbies, on everything that had once felt impossible. It was peaceful. But there was an underlying tension, like a storm cloud hovering, waiting to burst. Then, one night, it happened. A call came in while I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee. The caller ID said Mom. I froze. I knew it was time. The weight of the past few weeks hung in the air, and I felt my body tense as the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. When I finally picked up, my mom's voice sounded distant, almost fragile. Diana, she said softly, I know you've been upset with us, and I understand why. But you're all we have left now. We can't fix things without you. Her words were like a knife in my chest. She always knew how to make me feel like I was the one who had done something wrong. Like I was the one who had failed them. I'm not coming back, I said firmly. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was racing. The silence on the other end felt like an eternity. You can't just leave us like this, my mom continued. We need you. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the guilt. It was hard. So hard. The years of being the one who always helped. The one who always sacrificed. I couldn't just forget all of that. But I had to. I had to break free. I can't fix this anymore, Mom, I said. I've given everything I had, and it's still not enough. It's never enough. There was another long pause before she responded, her voice barely above a whisper. We've always relied on you, Diana. Maybe that was wrong. But we didn't know what else to do. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You need to learn to fix things on your own. I've carried this family long enough. It's your turn now. The call ended with silence, and I felt the weight of it settle into my chest. It was the silence of a choice made. I had chosen myself for the first time in years. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As I set the phone down, I realized that this was the moment when everything changed. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to carry the weight of everyone else's mistakes anymore, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. The days after that call passed in a blur. For the first time in what felt like forever, my life was truly mine. I could make decisions without wondering what my family would need from me next. I no longer had to wonder how much of myself I would have to sacrifice to make everything work for everyone else. But still, a small part of me couldn't help but feel uneasy. I went through my days, focusing on my work, getting up early for my morning jogs, and enjoying evenings spent reading books I had long forgotten about. It was a life I could have only dreamed of. But deep down, there was a quiet voice that wouldn't stop whispering to me, what if they really need you now? The question hung in the air, but I didn't answer it. I knew better than to allow myself to slip back into the cycle I had just escaped from. Still, I couldn't ignore the constant barrage of messages. My mom, Dad, and even Brandon kept calling. Texting. Reaching out. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was as if they were trying to claw their way back into my life, into the place where I had always been their safety net. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I sat down on my couch with a glass of wine, trying to unwind. My phone lit up again. Another text from my mom. Another one from Brandon. Another message about the house. I let out a heavy sigh and set my phone down. It was all the same. They hadn't learned. They hadn't changed. They still thought that when things got tough, I would be there, the one to save them, to fix everything. And for a moment, I considered it. I thought about reaching out, helping them again, just like I always had. But then I remembered everything I had been through, everything I had sacrificed. I couldn't go back. I opened my phone and sent a message to my mom. I knew it would be hard, but but I also knew it was time to make it clear once and for all. "I'm sorry," I typed, "but I can't do this anymore. I've given everything I could, and you need to figure this out without me. I can't keep sacrificing my life to make yours work." I hesitated before pressing send. This was it. There would be no turning back. No more excuses. I would no longer be their backup plan. The message sent, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It was the final step in reclaiming my life. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision lift off my chest. For the first time in years, I could breathe deeply, without the constant pressure of others' expectations. I had chosen myself. And in doing so, I had finally learned the most important lesson of all: you can't keep giving pieces of yourself to people who won't appreciate it. You can't sacrifice everything for others and expect them to ever value you the way you deserve. In the silence of my apartment, I realized I wasn't just walking away from my family. I was walking toward a future where I could finally be who I was meant to be, not just the person everyone else needed me to be. The weeks that followed were strange. I had never been in this place before, this space where I wasn't running around, constantly fixing things for my family, holding everything together. It was almost unsettling to have so much freedom. I spent my days in ways I hadn't in years, taking walks in the park, cooking meals without worrying about whether they'd be eaten, and enjoying the simple act of being alone without the guilt that I was abandoning anyone. But, as time passed, I started to notice a shift in how I felt. There was an emptiness, yes, but there was also something else. A quiet strength that I hadn't known I was capable of. I wasn't constantly bending to the needs of others anymore. I wasn't their fixer. And somehow, it felt good, yet, the pull of guilt still lingered. There were moments when I would glance at my phone, wondering if I should call my parents, wondering if they had figured things out without me. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I should have gone back. But each time that thought crept in, I reminded myself that I had to trust the decision I made. I had to trust that my stepping away was not just for me, but for them as well. They needed to learn to stand on their own. Then one day, after work, I was walking through the city when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my mom. "Diana, please. It's been weeks now, and we're still stuck. We don't know what to do. Please, we really need your help." My heart sank. It felt like a stone lodged in my chest. But this time, I didn't feel the urge to pick up the phone. Instead, I took a deep breath and put the phone down. They had pushed me to this point, and now, they had to deal with the consequences. I couldn't keep putting my life on hold for them. I had done my part. I stared at the phone for a moment longer. Another message popped up, this one from Brandon. "Mom's really upset, Diana. Please. She says you're punishing her. We can't keep going like this." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every word I had to say would be another justification for them. A justification for me continuing to give them pieces of myself that they never appreciated. I knew what I had to do, and I had already done it. I didn't want to feel guilty. I didn't want to go back to that place of constantly second-guessing myself. So, I went to bed that night and slept soundly for the first time in what felt like forever. There were no calls. No urgent messages. Just me, lying in the stillness of my own apartment, knowing that for the first time in years, I was putting myself first. A few days later, just as I had started settling into my new life, I got an unexpected call. It was my dad. I stared at the phone for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. Was this it? Would he finally tell me how much he appreciated what I'd done? But instead, his voice sounded tired, almost defeated. "Diana," he began, his tone unusually calm, "we need to talk. It's about the house." My stomach churned. My instincts told me to walk away from this conversation, to ignore him like I had been doing for the past several weeks. But something, maybe it was the years of responsibility, the years of being the one to hold everything together, made me pick up the phone. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice steady. We've tried, he continued. But it's falling apart. We can't do this without you. Please, Diana, we're really struggling. I felt a mixture of frustration and sorrow. Struggling? They had never truly been honest with me. All those years of asking for help, of taking and never giving back. And now, when it was too late, they were finally admitting they were struggling. You've been struggling for years, Dad, I said, my voice sharp. And where was I? Always the one to pick up the pieces. Every time, without question. But now I'm the one being blamed for not helping. There was silence on the other end. I knew he didn't know what to say. He couldn't. Not when the truth was laid out so clearly. I know, he murmured, almost as if trying to convince himself. But this time, it's different. We really need you. You're the only one who can help. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I wanted to scream at him, tell him how unfair this all was. How after all these years, they had never truly acknowledged what I'd done for them. But I knew that would solve nothing. I knew they didn't even understand what they were asking of me. I've already given everything I can, Dad, I said, my voice steady but firm. You and Mom moved Brandon, too. You all need to figure this out on your own. I'm not the solution to your problems anymore. Another long pause. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. I don't know how to fix this, Diana, he said softly. But we've always counted on you. Please, don't turn your back on us. I stayed silent for a moment, my heart heavy. The years of giving, of sacrificing, weighed on me more than the years of neglect. I had done what I could. I had shown up, I had worked hard, and I had supported them. But they hadn't supported me. They hadn't ever stopped to ask what I needed, what I wanted, or what I was sacrificing for them. I'm not turning my back on you, Dad, I finally said, my voice breaking. I'm just turning back to myself. There was no reply. I hung up the phone and set it down on the table. For a moment, I stared at it, feeling the weight of what I had just said. It was true. I wasn't turning my back on them. I was just finally stepping away from the role I had been forced to play for too many years. After the call, the silence that followed felt different. It wasn't the quiet that I had feared for years. It wasn't a silence filled with guilt, regret, or the expectation that I would return to my old role. No, this was different. This was a silence that spoke volumes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't answering their calls. I wasn't responding to their demands. I wasn't the one who had to fix everything. And it felt freeing. I spent the next few days with my thoughts, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about my childhood, about how I had been the one to clean up after everyone. I thought about how I had always been the one to hold everything together, even when they hadn't asked me to. But now, as I sat in my small apartment, with my own peace, I began to realize something. They had never asked me what I needed. They had never cared enough to find out. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I was so afraid of losing them, of being seen as the one who walked away, that I had never stopped to ask myself if I was even getting anything out of this relationship. I had spent so many years giving, sacrificing, and holding things together for people who never gave me the same in return. And now, as they were losing everything, I realized that it wasn't my responsibility to fix it anymore. They were adults. They could figure it out on their own. It wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that I wanted them to suffer. But I had come to understand that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you're drained. Real love comes with respect, and I hadn't been respected. It was time for them to learn what it felt like to stand on their own 2 feet. It was time for them to understand what it felt like when the person they had always relied on wasn't there to catch them. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to live my life without the constant weight of responsibility pressing down on me. I focused on myself, for the first time in years. I went out with friends, I worked on my hobbies, I read books without feeling guilty. I started to rebuild my life, but then, out of nowhere, I got another call. This time, it was from Brandon. I had hoped that the silence would last. I had hoped that they would understand, or at least come to realize what I had done for them. But the phone call changed everything. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an acknowledgement of my sacrifice. No, it was another demand. You're really just going to leave us to deal with everything? Diana? Brandon's voice was sharp, accusing. You're acting like you don't care anymore. We're struggling, and you're just going to walk away? I felt a tight knot in my chest as I listened to him. I knew exactly where this conversation was headed. I had heard it all before. It was the same old song, just with different lyrics. They were playing the victim again. They were trying to make me feel guilty for stepping back, for choosing to take care of myself. I've been carrying this family for years, Brandon, I said calmly, my voice steady. I've done more than my fair share. And when I stopped, when I finally said no, you're all acting like I'm the bad guy. Brandon didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear him breathing, probably trying to gather his thoughts, but I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Do you think this is easy for me? I continued. Do you think I enjoy watching all of you struggle? I've given everything I had, and it was never enough. It's never going to be enough. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Brandon spoke again, his voice was quieter, more uncertain. I don't know what to do, Diana. I'm sorry. I just don't know how to fix this. That was when I knew. The truth had finally sunk in. This wasn't just about the house or the money. This was about their inability to take responsibility for their own actions. They had relied on me for so long that they didn't even know how to stand on their own anymore. And I realized, in that moment, that it wasn't my job to fix them. It wasn't my job to carry their burdens anymore. I'm sorry, Brandon, I said softly, my heart heavy. But I can't do this anymore. I've done my part. I've given you everything I had. But now, it's your turn. The call ended shortly after that. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel guilt. I just felt peace. Looking back, I realized that leaving wasn't just about walking away from my family. It wasn't just about ending the financial support or cutting ties. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own freedom. For the first time in years, I had the space to breathe, but more importantly, I had learned something valuable. Love isn't about sacrifice. It isn't about constantly giving, constantly fixing, and never asking for anything in return. True love, real love, comes from a place of balance. It's about respecting each other's boundaries and understanding that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to let someone stand on their own. I don't regret leaving. I don't regret stepping back from the role I had played in their lives for so long. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I questioned myself, when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But as the days passed, I realized that my decision had been the best thing I could have done for myself. I had spent so many years trying to fix their problems. Trying to save them from themselves. But in the process, I had lost myself. I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted, and what I needed. And that was the real tragedy. Now, I'm building my life. I'm learning how to take care of myself without feeling guilty. I'm learning how to say no without fear. And, most importantly, I'm learning that I am enough, just as I am. So, to anyone who's been in my shoes, anyone who's spent years taking care of everyone else at the expense of their own happiness, I have one thing to say: it's okay to put yourself first. It's okay to walk away. There is no shame in setting boundaries. There is no shame in saying no. And there is certainly no shame in walking away from people who expect you to sacrifice everything for them. True love doesn't demand sacrifice. It doesn't require you to lose yourself in the process. Real love is about mutual respect, support, and understanding. And when that's missing, it's okay to walk away. I don't know what the future holds for me or my family. Maybe one day, things will change. Maybe they won't. But for now, I'm at peace. I'm no longer the one who has to fix everything. And that, for me, is enough. So, to anyone who feels like they're always giving and never receiving, I want you to know, you are worthy of love, you are worthy of respect, and you are worthy of living your life for yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to carry their burdens. You don't. Sometimes, the hardest thing you'll ever do is let go. But once you do, you'll realize it was the best decision you ever made.